Insecurity is loud. It needs to be seen, heard, validated. It brags about things that don't need bragging. It compares itself to others constantly. It can't handle criticism without collapsing or exploding. It mistakes aggression for strength and volume for confidence. And you can hear it in the language. Secure men speak differently. They don't need to convince you of their worth. They don't need to tear others down to feel elevated. They don't need constant reassurance that they're enough. But insecure men, they broadcast it in every conversation, in the way they speak about themselves, about others, about their achievements, in how they respond to challenge, in what they need to prove. The Stoics understood that true strength is quiet, that the man who knows his worth doesn't need to announce it, that confidence without insecurity is simply competence without performance. Today we're examining 8 things only insecure men say out loud, not to mock anyone because we've all been insecure at some point, but to recognize the pattern. Because you can't fix what you can't see, and recognizing insecurity, that's the first step toward actually becoming secure. Let's be clear about what insecurity actually is. Insecurity isn't feeling doubt. It isn't experiencing fear. It isn't questioning yourself or acknowledging weakness. Those are human experiences. Even the strongest men deal with them. Insecurity is the chronic need for external validation to feel adequate. It's measuring your worth by comparison. It's the fear that if people see the real you, they'll find you lacking. So you perform, you compensate, you build a persona that you think will be accepted, admired, respected. And that persona talks, constantly, because silence feels like disappearing. The insecure man lives in constant anxiety about how he's perceived. He curates his image obsessively. He can't tolerate being wrong because it threatens the carefully constructed identity. He can't celebrate others' success because it feels like his own failure. He can't rest in his own value because he doesn't believe he has any. So he talks, and what he says reveals exactly what he's trying to hide. Here's what makes insecurity particularly destructive. It's exhausting. You're constantly managing impressions, monitoring reactions, adjusting your presentation. You're never just present. You're always performing, always calculating, always defending, and people feel it. They might not articulate it, but there's a dissonance between what you're projecting and what's underneath, between the confidence you're performing and the fear you're concealing. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Translation: stop caring so much about what people think. Their perception isn't reality. Their judgment isn't truth. Your worth isn't determined by their assessment. But the insecure man can't internalize this. He needs their good opinion. He requires their validation. Without it, he feels like he's nothing. And that need, that chronic, desperate need for external approval, drives every word, every boast, every defensive response, every comparison. The 8 phrases we're about to examine are all variations of the same core fear: I'm not enough. And if people see that, I'll be exposed, rejected, diminished. But here's the paradox. The very behaviors designed to hide insecurity are what make it most visible. Real confidence doesn't need to announce itself. Real strength doesn't need to prove itself. Real value doesn't need constant validation. So when you hear these 8 phrases, whether from others or from yourself, you're hearing insecurity speaking, fear wearing a mask, weakness pretending to be strength, and the first step to security, recognizing the mask. 1. I make X amount of money, when nobody asked. Unprompted money talk is one of the clearest signals of insecurity. The conversation is about something unrelated, and suddenly, yeah, well, I make 6 figures, or that's pocket change for me, or I dropped X amount on this watch. Nobody asked, nobody cares, but you announced it anyway. Why? Because you're measuring your worth by your net worth. You're trying to establish status, demand respect, or compensate for feeling inadequate in other areas. You think if people know you have money, they'll value you. But here's what actually happens. People hear desperation. They hear insecurity. They hear someone who needs external markers to feel significant. Seneca, who was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, wrote extensively about the emptiness of wealth as a source of identity. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. The secure man with money doesn't need to tell you about it. His life reflects it naturally. He's not hiding it, but he's not brandishing it either, because his sense of self isn't tied to his bank account. But the insecure man can't separate worth from wealth. So he drops financial references constantly. Prices, salaries, investments, all signals that say, please see me as valuable, please respect me, please don't look at the parts of me that aren't impressive. The reframe, not I make X, but letting your character and competence speak for themselves. Not using money as social currency, but building actual value, skill, integrity, wisdom that doesn't need announcement. Real wealth is quiet. Insecurity is loud. 2. She was all over me. I could have had her. This is sexual insecurity disguised as conquest. She was into me, but I wasn't interested. I could have taken her home, but whatever. Women always approach me. You're announcing your sexual desirability to establish status. You're using women as trophies in a game only you're playing. You need people to know that you're wanted, that you're chosen, that you're sexually valuable. But what you're actually revealing is that you measure your worth by female attention, that you need external validation of your attractiveness, that deep down you don't feel desirable. So you need to constantly prove that you are. The secure man doesn't talk this way. If something happened, it happened. He doesn't need to broadcast it. He doesn't need witnesses to his desirability. He's not using women's interest as currency for pale respect. Epictetus taught, whoever then wishes to be free, let him neither wish for anything nor flee from anything that depends on others. When your sense of adequacy depends on women finding you attractive, you're not free. You're enslaved to their perception. Every interaction becomes a test. Every lack of interest becomes a wound. But the secure man's worth isn't determined by who wants him. He's interested in connection, not collection, in quality, not quantity, in actual relationship, not social proof. The reframe, not she was all over me, but respecting privacy and not using people as status symbols, not needing to prove desirability, but being someone genuinely worth desiring, respectful, present, authentic. Real attraction doesn't need announcement. Insecurity does. 3. I'm an alpha male. That's beta behavior. If you have to tell people you're an alpha, you're not. Real leaders don't announce their leadership. Real strength doesn't need labels. Real dominance, the healthy kind, based on competence and character, is simply felt. It doesn't require declaration, but insecure men cling to these categories. Alpha, beta, sigma, whatever the internet told them to be, they need the framework because without it, they don't know who they are. And here's what's really happening. They're terrified of being seen as weak, as lesser, as low status. So they adopt aggressive posturing and call it leadership. They mistake dominance for confidence. They confuse intimidation with respect. But Marcus Aurelius, who had absolute power, wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He didn't call himself alpha. He didn't categorize others as beta. He focused on virtue, on character, on living according to principle. The labels were irrelevant. The actions were everything. When you announce yourself as alpha, you're revealing several things. 1, you're insecure about your status and need to claim it verbally since it's not naturally recognized. 2, you view relationships as hierarchies where you need to establish dominance. 3, you've outsourced your identity to a concept instead of building actual character. The secure man doesn't think in these terms. He's not worried about where he ranks. He's focused on being competent, principled, and effective. If people respect him, great. If they don't, that's their prerogative. His worth isn't up for vote. The reframe, not "I'm an alpha," but simply being competent and letting that speak, not categorizing others as beta, but seeing people as individuals with their own strengths. Leadership is demonstrated, not declared. Insecurity is announced. 4. I never lose. I don't make mistakes. This is ego defending itself from reality. I don't lose, I either win or I learn. I never make mistakes, just have learning experiences. Failure isn't in my vocabulary. You're trying to sound resilient, but what you're actually revealing is that you can't psychologically tolerate the idea of failure. That being wrong threatens your entire sense of self. That your identity is so fragile it can't survive admitting imperfection. But everyone loses, everyone fails, everyone makes mistakes. The difference is that secure people can acknowledge it without their identity collapsing. Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." When you can't admit your own failures, you can't learn from them. When you can't acknowledge mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them. When your ego is so defended that reality can't penetrate, you stop growing. The secure man says, "I failed, I was wrong, I made a mistake." And he says it without his voice shaking, without needing to add 17 qualifiers, without spiraling into shame or defensiveness, because his worth isn't tied to being perfect. It's tied to being honest, to being capable of growth, to being someone who faces reality instead of managing perception. The reframe, not "I never lose," but "I lost, here's what I learned." Not defensive reframing of every failure, but honest acknowledgement and actual learning. Admitting error is strength. Denying it is fragility, pretending to be invincible. 5. No offense, but I'm just being honest. This is cruelty hiding behind honesty. No offense, but you're doing this wrong. I'm just being real with you. You're not good at this. I'm brutally honest. Some people can't handle it. You're using honesty as a shield for insecurity-driven aggression. You're tearing someone down and calling it helpful. You're being needlessly harsh and framing it as virtue. But here's what's really happening. You feel inadequate, so you elevate yourself by diminishing others. You can't build yourself up internally, so you tear others down externally. Your honesty isn't for their benefit, it's for yours. Real honesty is kind. It considers timing, delivery, and purpose. It asks, is this helpful? Is this necessary? Is this the right moment? Marcus Aurelius practiced this. Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question. What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? The secure man gives feedback when it's asked for or genuinely helpful. He does it with care. He doesn't hide behind "I'm just honest" when called on being cruel. He takes responsibility for both, his honesty and his kindness. But the insecure man weaponizes truth. He uses brutal honesty to mask his need to feel superior. He confuses harshness with strength, cruelty with clarity. The reframe, not "I'm just being honest," but "is this helpful? Is this kind? Is this the right time?" Not hiding aggression behind truth, but speaking honestly and respectfully. Real honesty doesn't need cruelty. Insecurity does. 6. I'm not like other guys. This is insecurity through differentiation. I'm not like most men. Other guys just want one thing. I'm different. I'm more evolved than that. You're trying to establish uniqueness by putting down your gender. You're creating value by declaring everyone else valueless. You're saying, pick me, I'm special, I'm not one of them. But what you're revealing is that you don't feel inherently valuable. So you need to contrast yourself with others. You need to create a false hierarchy where you're on top because you've convinced someone else that everyone else is beneath you. Epictetus taught, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. The secure man doesn't need to differentiate himself by tearing down other men. He doesn't derive value from being not like them. He simply is who he is, unique by nature, not by declaration. And here's what women notice. When you say, I'm not like other guys, you're admitting you view yourself in competition with other men for female approval. That's exactly like other guys. The secure ones just aren't competing. The reframe, not I'm not like other guys, but simply being who you are without comparison or contrast. Not establishing value by diminishing others, but being valuable in your own right. You don't need to be different from others. You just need to be authentically yourself. 7. I was just joking. Can't you take a joke? This is avoiding accountability for impact. You say something harsh, inappropriate, or cutting. Someone reacts, and immediately, I was just joking, relax. You're using humor as a delivery system for hostility, then hiding behind it's just a joke when called on it. You're testing boundaries, then retreating when consequences appear. But jokes are supposed to be funny. If the only person laughing is you and the other person is hurt, it wasn't a joke. It was an insult you tried to disguise. And can't you take a joke is particularly insidious. You're not just avoiding responsibility, you're making them the problem. Now they're too sensitive, too serious, no sense of humor. You've shifted from I said something hurtful to you're responding wrong. This is classic insecurity. You can't handle direct confrontation. You can't stand behind your words. So you test the waters with jokes, and if people push back, you retreat into just kidding. The secure man stands behind his words. If he means something, he says it directly. If he's joking, it's actually funny and clearly playful. And if he misjudges and hurts someone, he apologizes. He doesn't blame them for not getting it. Seneca warned, we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. The insecure man is frightened of direct confrontation, so he delivers everything wrapped in ambiguity, half serious, half joking, testing, probing, always with an escape route. The reframe, not I was just joking, but either genuinely joking where everyone's laughing, or standing behind what you said, not can't you take a joke, but I'm sorry, I misjudged. That wasn't funny. Say what you mean what you say. Don't hide behind humor when you're being serious. 8. People are just jealous of me. This is the ultimate insecurity defense mechanism. Someone criticizes you, someone doesn't like you, someone disagrees with your approach. And your explanation? They're just jealous, they're hating, they can't handle my success. You're dismissing all negative feedback as envy. You're protecting your ego by refusing to consider that the criticism might be valid. You're so terrified of being wrong that you've created a worldview where you can't be. Any negative response is just jealousy. But here's reality. Most people aren't thinking about you enough to be jealous. Most criticism comes from observation, not envy. Most people who don't like you simply don't like you. Not because you're successful, but because of how you show up. Marcus Aurelius practiced radical self-honesty. If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone. The harm is to persist in one's own self-deception and ignorance. The secure man welcomes feedback. He doesn't assume it's jealousy. He asks, is there truth here? What can I learn? Even if 90% of criticism is baseless, he looks for the 10% that might help him grow. But the insecure man can't do this. His ego is too fragile. So he dismisses everything as jealousy, resentment, hating. He never learns, he never adjusts. He just becomes more isolated in his delusion. The reframe, not "they're just jealous," but "what can I learn from this feedback?" Not dismissing all criticism as envy, but having the security to assess criticism honestly. Some people might be jealous. Most people are just responding to what they see. Listen, look at those 8 phrases. I make X amount of money. When nobody asked, she was all over me. I could have had her. I'm an alpha male. That's beta behavior. I never lose. I don't make mistakes. No offense, but I'm just being honest. I'm not like other guys. I was just joking. Can't you take a joke? People are just jealous of me. Each one is a defense mechanism, a strategy to manage the core fear. What if I'm not enough? Money talk says, my bank account proves I'm valuable. Sexual. Bragging says, my desirability proves I'm worthwhile. Alpha posturing says, my dominance proves I'm strong. Denying failure says, my perfection proves I'm capable. Harsh honesty says, diminishing you elevates me. Not like other guys says, differentiating from others gives me value. Just joking says, I'm scared to stand behind my words. They're jealous says, all criticism is envy, never truth. It's all armor, all performance, all exhausting. And here's the cost. Insecurity doesn't just exhaust you, it isolates you. Because people can't connect with a performance. They can't trust someone who's always managing their image. They can't build with someone who can't admit mistakes. They can't respect someone who constantly needs to prove their worth. Real relationships, professional, romantic, platonic, require vulnerability. They require being able to say, I was wrong, and I don't know, and I'm struggling. They require showing up as you actually are, not as you want to be perceived. But insecure men can't do that. The risk feels too high, so they stay in performance mode, and they wonder why their relationships feel shallow, why trust is hard to build, why people seem to keep them at arm's length. The answer, because you're keeping yourself at arm's length. You're not letting anyone see the real you because you've decided the real you isn't acceptable. But here's what the Stoics understood. Your worth is intrinsic. It doesn't come from money, status, sexual conquests, being right, being dominant, or being better than others. It comes from character, from virtue, from living according to your principles, from being honest, courageous, self-disciplined, and just. Those qualities don't need announcement. They don't need defense. They don't need validation. They simply are. Epictetus, who went from slave to one of the most influential philosophers in history, said, if a person gave your body away to some passerby, you'd be furious. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who comes along, so they may abuse you, leaving it disturbed and troubled. Have you no shame in that? Every time you speak from insecurity, you're handing your mind to someone else. You're giving them power over your sense of worth. You're making them the judge of your adequacy. Take it back. Reclaim your mind. Build your worth internally so you don't need external validation to feel whole. That's security. Not the absence of fear or doubt, but the refusal to let those feelings drive your behavior. The ability to be yourself without constant performance. The freedom to be wrong, to be imperfect, to be human, and still know you're enough. Here's your practice. For the next week, catch yourself before speaking from insecurity, before you brag, before you compare, before you defend your ego unnecessarily. Pause and ask, why do I need to say this? What am I trying to prove? What fear is driving this? You don't need to share every achievement. You don't need to establish dominance in every interaction. You don't need to be right about everything. You don't need constant proof that you're valuable. You're valuable because you choose to be valuable through your actions, your character, your integrity, not through what you announce or defend or prove. Start speaking from that place, from sufficiency, not scarcity. From security, not fear. From truth, not performance. The Stoics knew the unexamined life isn't worth living. And the examined life begins with hearing what you actually say and asking yourself why you're saying it. Your worth doesn't need a spokesperson. It just needs to be lived. Stay focused. Stay grounded. And remember, the quiet work you do today is shaping the strength they'll never see coming.